WCNC TV Charlotte. This is Flashpoint, where power and politics collide, and the tough questions get asked and answered.
A controversial toll lane project back in the headlines. The contentious issue has everyone picking a side. We're taking a look at it all this morning on Flashpoint. That's right, and politics and power will collide today. Thanks for joining us this Sunday morning for a special edition of Flashpoint. I'm Beth Troutman with a groundbreaking Monday slated. They're talking the toll lanes, folks. They're groundbreaking on Monday, and we still have not decided exactly what we want to do, right? Joining us to discuss this controversial issue today, Jim Puckett, Mecklenburg County Commissioner, Bob Morgan, President and CEO of Charlotte Chamber of Commerce, and John Hettwer, CEO of Payroll Plus. Before we get to actually talking about this, I do want to say that there was, on Friday, a press conference with state and local officials. North Carolina Department of Transportation Secretary Nick Tennyson sent out this statement on behalf of Governor McCrory's office. Listen to this. Reading in part, the governor fully understands and experiences the congestion issue in the region, and he welcomes constructive dialogue, viable ideas, and realistic solutions. It goes on to say the governor neither requested this project nor would it be appropriate for him to cancel the contract based on a request from 4 representatives without clear direction from local elected officials who requested and approved the I-77 Express Lanes project. Now, you heard that all about local representatives, local officials. You all are local folks, local businessmen, local power leaders. Let's talk about this issue. Let's start with, how did we get here? Jim, I'm going to start with you. How did we get to this point?
Well, under the former governor's reign or term, Bev Perdue, she directed NCDOT to go and figure out a way to widen I-77 with no money. And that's ultimately how I think we got to the P3, the private-public partnership, which provides tolls. And this project does that. It widens a road with no money, but unfortunately it does not deal with the congestion, and the design of it just clogs North Mecklenburg for another 50 years, and there are a number of things we'll talk about. But essentially we had an old funding formula and a Democratic-controlled legislature that was misusing the transit tax funds. They came up with a plan, and the current governor ended up having to adopt that plan, and we think that he should say, I've made fundamental changes, we need to cancel and start over.
Bob, do you agree with that? Do you think that's how we got to this position? Is this a similar build-up for you?
Well, the Charlotte Chamber supports the managed toll lane project. We are the second or third fastest growing city in America. We're 2.5 million people in our metropolitan area today. We're going to double that number in the next 20 to 30 years. This project is an opportunity to provide an alternative to congestion, a proven method that's been used in other markets in the United States. Those who use it will help to pay for it, along with the public-private partnership that was just mentioned. It really belongs in a bigger context. If we're going to double our population, how are we going to continue to move people and product in and through this region? We made a decision 20 years ago to invest in transit as an alternative to congestion. We've been working for the better part of the last decade, Jim's right, under a previous administration, to figure out how we're going to fund additional highway capacity. This is a way to get additional capacity on a 26-mile stretch of interstate that otherwise is going to take at least another decade in the making to address. In the meantime, we're talking about one of the most congested corridors in Mecklenburg County. It's an opportunity to provide some relief there.
Now, opponents of this, and obviously, John, you're an opponent of having the actual toll lanes.
Absolutely.
You say that in order for this to be profitable, you say that it's going to have to keep these roadways congested.
Well, absolutely. You know, I mean, and that's one of the things that, you know, quite simply, one of the biggest documents that seriously hurts and that we have is there is a slide from the Turnpike Toll Association that was from their summit in Prague, Czechoslovakia. And in that slide it says, you know, here's a problem with managed lanes. And this is their trade association. And they said the problem with managed lanes is, in order to ensure the financial success of a managed lane, you have to have operational failure of the general purpose lanes. And that is a serious problem for North Mecklenburg, because there are many situations for the residents of North Mecklenburg that they cannot use that toll lane even if they want to.
So you're saying that this is basically a local road for the people who are in the North Mecklenburg and in the southern part of Iredell County?
Absolutely. It's funny you say that, because I had a discussion with Warren Cooksley, as one of the representatives for NCDOT. And I said, Warren, you got to understand this is a local road. And he said, John, the interstate should not be a local road. And I said, Warren, I couldn't agree with you more. I can't agree with you more. However, when we have no other roads, we have to use it as a local road. If you have no other opportunity but that interstate, what are you going to use?
And that's where this fails. The problem is you've had a five-fold explosive growth in North Mecklenburg in the last 15 years. There has not been one lane added on any north-south corridor in that time. They have not even widened the shoulders of 115 or 21 or 77 in that period of time. NCDOT has taken this area that has seen growth grow by five-fold and not added any capacity. So there is nowhere else to go except I-77. As a county commissioner and a school board member, we clogged 115 with schools. So the only local road to get from Huntersville to Cornelius is I-77. And because of Lake Norman, you can't get around that. This design would work on I-95. This design would work in Texas, where there's wide open spaces.
Well, there have been problems in Texas, though, right? They're having some real big financial problems.
And look, there have been canceled contracts for Centra in Chicago just this week, in Canada, in Virginia. So to say that you can't get out of this because it was not designed properly happens all the time. But the biggest problem we have is Lake Norman. You cannot go around it. You can only go over it. This contract gives away the state of North Carolina's only dry right-of-way for 50 years. And the notion that we will not need to expand that somewhere down the road is crazy. We are purposely building the new Yadkin River, which was I-85 was 8 lanes, and it went down to 2 lanes over the Yadkin River Bridge. This design does that where man-made.
Let's talk about that for 1 second. I spoke earlier this week to Ned Curran, the NCDOT chairman. He actually addressed this issue of whether or not changes could be made in this 50-year contract. Let's see if we can take a listen to that.
Contract actually has a provision that says we can make changes during the 50-year period. We can add lanes. We just may have to pay the public-private operator because they may lose revenue.
So there we go. They're saying, so Ned Curran says that we can, in fact, make changes. It's just going to cost us in order to make changes. Is that something that you think is going to be a problem solver in this case if we see problems with the toll lane?
I think the contract, the public-private partnership that's in place is one that is a good model. It's been used elsewhere. Let's talk about Texas. We had a representative who was down in Dallas recently for the opening of the managed lane projects on the LBJ freeway. Commuters love it. They've reduced congestion by 80%. They're handling 23% more capacity than they had previously. Fort Worth is doing it. We're seeing those are great examples of markets that we compete with who are employing P3s to provide relief, alternatives to congestion, letting those who use it to help to fund it. And they're creating, not only are they moving people more effectively, they're creating economic development as a result. Plano, Texas has just landed the North American headquarters of Nissan, a 3,000 job project. Toll roads are serving the land where Nissan will put its corporate headquarters.
Look, opponents bring up business as a problem with this toll road. Tell us why.
But let me just talk about, and I received an e-newsletter from the Charlotte Chamber yesterday that talked about and reiterated their point relative to this plan. I would be the first to admit, if I was Bob Morgan sitting here, this plan works for Charlotte. It does not work for North Mecklenburg residents. Let's talk about the LBJ freeway, okay? I fortunately or unfortunately have lived there, okay? In 1985, I lived in North Dallas at about a mile from Welch Road and LBJ, okay? And I can tell you, I guarantee and I will admit that it's changed a lot in 30 years. So I'm not pretending to say I knew what it was like. But I can tell you one thing. South of LBJ is North Dallas. There is grid after grid. One block is another parallel road. Another block is a parallel road. Another block is a parallel road. North of LBJ is Farmers Branch. North of Farmers Branch, Texas is Carrollton, Texas. Parallel road parallels LBJ, parallels LBJ, parallels LBJ.
We don't have that solution here.
And that, frankly, if I may, Beth, let me just show you. And I feel like Ross Perot for putting this up here, so bear with me. But this is really one of the fundamental. If there's people in Charlotte who are out there saying, well, what's the big deal? Why is Lake Norman so frustrated? This is why the Lake Norman residents are so frustrated. And here's why. So I, as an individual, I'm just an individual, I live right around exit 25. My son goes to school at exit 30. Okay? And if you look at these two little dots, okay, that is, and I'm sure the camera, that might be a little better, that is where there are entrance ramps. And anybody can go to the I-77 mobility website and see this particular document.
So
okay?
You're saying there aren't enough ways to get on and off the toll roads if people need to use it to get from exit to exit?
Correct. And what I'm saying is if I have to take my son to school and I'm at exit 25 and he goes to school in Davidson, at community school in Davidson, in order to get up there, I do not have another road other than I-77. And here's the problem. You say, well, John, pay the toll. I can't, because between exit 25 and exit 30, there is only one entrance. I'll even take a step further. Between exit 23...
I'm going to have to cut you off right
that's
here.
fine.
We'll get back to this. We're going to come back to this chart after the break. I've got to take a quick commercial break, everybody. More Flashpoint and more I-77, more importantly, coming up. Welcome back to Flashpoint, everybody. The contentious issue, I-77, in fact, so difficult to chat about. We had a number of people cancel to be on the show. I would like to point that out. Several people, local and state officials, could not show up. Here are some quick facts. The two toll lanes would extend from the Brookshire Freeway in Charlotte to exit 28 in Cornelius, then would go down to a single lane until exit 36. The state signed a 50-year contract with Spanish company Centra to design and build and operate the toll lanes. And based on the terms of the contract, it hinders addition of free lanes for 50 years. We're going to address that actually coming up in this segment. $100 million is the number that's being thrown around right now as a penalty for backing out of the contract. And we've got to talk about that too, about where that particular number came from. Now, we were talking about entrances and exits to 77 when we took a break.
Yeah, and I thank you. And so I just, as I put this up and I can put this chart up, the point is from exit 23 to exit 31, there is one single entrance point. Okay, so if there's a single entrance point, you can either get out, but you can't get in. You can either get in, but you can't get out. So you cannot use that toll lane. So if you're traveling from exit 23 to 31, and as a salesperson, right, I'm up and down the interstate all day long in Mooresville, Cornelius, Davidson, Huntersville, Yadkinville. I go up and down 77 quite regularly. And because of this, we can't use that toll lane. So even if I had a pocket full of money, which I don't, if I had a pocket full of money, I can't use that toll lane.
Just because of the exit.
Because of the ability to use that. So it is a layout that is the problem for the Lake Norman residents.
So
Beth, excuse me, but I'm not a resident of Lake Norman. I live at Mountain Island. The Lake Norman area is closer, the retail of Lake Norman is closer to me than South Charlotte, Uptown Charlotte. The Lake Norman area suffers today because I can't use those interchanges on a Saturday afternoon today. I don't use them because they're blocked. The managed lanes will provide an alternative to the existing congestion. It will help free up on the untolled lanes capacity that will create opportunity for the retailers, just like it has in Texas and other markets.
But that's the problem, is it doesn't. You won't be able to get off on the retail. If you're on the toll lane, you cannot get off at exit 23, you cannot get off at exit 25, you cannot get off at exit 28, you cannot get off at exit 30, you cannot get off at 33 or 36. They're going to have to build new lanes just to be able to exit off of the toll lane. So for Bob to come from Mountain Island Lake, he can get on the toll lane and go to Mooresville, but he can't get off at those exits. Now, Ned Curran
I can use the free lanes to get off at those exits.
You can use the free lanes. And oh, by the way, in Texas, if they took 80% of the congestion off, that was great. This contract and Mobility Partners says a maximum 20% relief in congestion. 1 out of 5 cars, maximum 20%. We're going to double the number of lanes. We will double the capacity, but at best take 20% of the congestion off because people still have to stay in the clogged lanes.
And Jim, just to be clear, from Catawba, right, in the Catawba area, in that area, it is 10%. Cornelius, from Catawba Road all the way up through that area, it is 10% in the beginning. It's not 20%. 20% is being extremely generous. We've got a chart to show you that if you do want to see that.
So we have about 45 seconds left in this block. We've got a contract already in place. We're about to break ground tomorrow on Monday. What's the suggestion that gets done here? Like we've got
cancel the contract. Save $77 million right up front. These contracts get canceled all the time. Government makes mistakes. It usually comes with a big price tag. So the governor can cancel a contract just like he vetoes bills that local legislators
Then what
say.
happens? Then are we stuck with
The
just...
taxpayers of North Carolina are due a $100 million bill with nothing to show in
Where
return.
does that number come from?
That's a very good question.
And nobody can tell us why that. That's the number that's just
That
been
is the
drawn out
number
of the
that
hat.
was pulled out of a hat and said, this should scare them away, right? But Bob, if you can laugh at that, but then ask DOT to provide that number.
And they
I can
can't.
tell you, let me speak for Senator Tartan, he's not here.
We're going to come back with Senator Tartt. So I know it's so hard to do, but we've got to take a quick commercial break, everybody. More Flashpoint, more I-77 coming up right after this break. Welcome back to this special episode of Flashpoint. We're talking I-77, and boy, howdy, is this a heated issue. We were talking about Senator Tartt just as we went to commercial break. I'll let you get to that really quickly, and then we've got to talk about this contract.
Yeah, well, you'd mentioned about the $100 million, okay? And Senator Tartt, and I encourage you to talk to him about it, but he took the contract.
I tried to talk to Senator Tartt.
And he took the contract to the NCGA council. Okay, they have counsel in Raleigh to do it, and he said, took this and saying, do me a favor, take this contract, give me the highest amount we'd pay and the lowest amount we'd pay. I know the lowest amount could be zero if we cancel for cost, but tell me the highest amount he paid. After 2 weeks, they came back to him and said, Jeff, we cannot calculate this. This has to be litigated. In our 35 years of practice, this is the most convoluted contract that we have ever seen, that we can't even calculate it. So if the NCGA council can't come up with a number, who comes up with $100 million? And it's interesting that nobody has ever documented where that $100 million is. That was simply a number that was picked out of the air going, well, this should scare people off.
Beth, whatever the number is, who is going to stand up in front of 99 other counties in North Carolina and say, we're going to pay $50 million, we're going to pay $100 million for nothing? There's no viable alternative to what's going to break ground tomorrow. There's no viable alternative. It's taken us a decade to get here. It would take us another decade to find some alternative to a comprehensive 26-mile answer to this corridor. It would be suicide to stand in front of the taxpayers of North Carolina to say you're going to pay, pick the number, and get nothing in return for it.
Let's talk about that. First off, I keep a note on government waste. NC Tracks, $400 million this year wasted by the North Carolina General Assembly. Doesn't work. TIMS, the tax increment IT, $65 million. Doesn't work. Trash. $87 million in reval in Mecklenburg County alone because of a mistake. $12 million a decade ago when I was on county commission for judicial software that didn't work. When government makes mistakes, it costs money. Here's the other fact though. Let's say it's $100 million. If we don't build the toll lanes, we do not have to build the 2 interchanges that only feed the toll lanes for $77 million.
That's an extra cost on top of
That is a cost that they don't have to do. So if it's $100 million, we're only $23 million difference.
Well, Jim, let me jump in there.
There's a guaranteed $72 million back charge. So this is, I can explain it. I am quite easily explain it to the people in North Carolina. I can also say, why do I need to build a Bonner Bridge? Because people live on the Outer Banks and can't get away from a hurricane fast enough. Because it makes economic sense. Let's go back to the economic sense piece of it. This limits truck traffic over Lake Norman for 50 years. Ned Curran said we can pay a penalty and expand this road. That's true. What we don't know, though, is we've given up the right-of-way that we own, the taxpayers have paid for. We're going to have to expand that capacity over Lake Norman. Now, if a Snell daughter can hold up the Monroe bypass for a decade, what do you think building over Lake Davidson and Lake Norman is going to be? We don't know what that risk is 15 years away. We have given away the only dry land that this state owns.
Beth, this is not a line item mistake. This is an opportunity, and it's the way we're going to fund transportation infrastructure in one of the fastest growing regions in the country. It's not just here. It's I-485 in the south. It's Independence Boulevard. It's how we're going to have capacity. I-77 to South Carolina. This is a major public policy decision that was made in the last decade. To change it would have consequences well beyond just Lake Norman.
You're talking about Bill 817, correct? And we're going to get to more of this in just a minute. We've got to take another commercial break, everybody. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We only have a little bit of time left, everybody. 30 seconds for final thoughts. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Puckett.
You can't give away your only right-of-way for 50 years and not have consequences for economic development. The governor can change this just like a veto. It is a horrible plan for North Mecklenburg. Might work for Charlotte. For North Mecklenburg, it will not work going over water.
This is a proven alternative to congestion. Those who use it will help to pay for it. It's an answer not just for the Lake Norman area, but as we look to fund a comprehensive transportation infrastructure investment throughout the Charlotte region and in North Carolina, one of the fastest growing parts of the United States. Tomorrow's going to be a good day.
At the end, politicians are elected to represent the people. This issue is not wanted anywhere from North Mecklenburg. I picked this sign up for my print shop this morning, and I asked the print shop guy, do you know anybody in favor of tolls? Well, no, I knew a couple in Charlotte. Right, there is not people in North Mecklenburg. The election made it clear in Huntersville, and it is very clear, it is not even close that you're hearing 95%. I would say it's 99%. The people that I know support it are extremely small.
Thank you, gentlemen, so much for joining me. We're going to do, I think, another edition of Flashpoint on I-77 alone. We hope to see you next Sunday. Thank you for joining us. This is Flashpoint.